Are you looking for inspiration on a daily basis? Then check out Deal to Heal Teas. With our inspirational teas, you're sure to find something to inspire you. That's dealtohealteas.com. Put some inspiration in your situation. Wear inspirational tea and be inspired all day. Let's go to dealtohealteas.com. Again, that's dealtohealteas.com. Hey guys, if you're enjoying this podcast, then I know you'll enjoy the Girl Dad Discussion podcast. I'm your host, Ernest James, and I believe the relationship between a daughter and her father is one of the most important relationships a young lady can have. And therefore, my mission is to promote the daddy-daughter relationship by sharing the voices of girl dads to the world. So check out our podcast on every platform where podcasts can be listened to. And if you want to watch the podcast, check us out on our YouTube channel. Again, that's the Girl Dad Discussions podcast with your host, Ernest James. Welcome to Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. On this podcast, my guest and I will discuss topics and ways to help us to heal in every area of our lives. I believe that everyone can live a life that is happy, healthy, and whole. So I'm on a mission to help people to deal, heal, and fulfill. Deal with your problem, heal from the pain, and fulfill your purpose. Thanks for tuning in. Let's get to it. Welcome to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. I am your host, Ernest James, and I believe that everyone can and should live a life that is whole, healed, and healthy. And therefore, I'm on a mission to help people to deal, heal, and fulfill, to deal with your problems, to heal from the pain, and to fulfill your purpose. Thank you guys once again for tuning in to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. If you haven't already, make sure to listen, like, subscribe, and share our podcast on all of your social media platforms. Also, make sure you guys are checking us out on our new YouTube channel, the Deal to Heal Podcasting Network on YouTube. That is our new YouTube channel where you will not only find the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast, but you will also find our sister podcast, should I say, of the Girl Dad Discussions podcast, where I have conversations with girl dads and sometimes daughters in order to combat the narrative of the absent father and the fatherless daughter. So make sure you guys go check that out. Again, you can find the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast there. You will also find the Girl Dad Discussions podcast there on our podcast channel, Deal to Heal Podcasting Network channel on YouTube. So make sure you guys are checking us out there. Man, so you know what? I just want to jump right in it today. So today, just like any other day, we are blessed with a guest, Miss Ladonna. How you doing?
I am great. How are you doing today?
I am good. First of all, I want to say thank you for being here, because you could have been doing anything else with anyone else, but you're here with me and my listeners, and we definitely appreciate it. So thank you for coming.
Thank you so much for having me. Honestly, you're saving my abs. I just bought a new ab machine today and I put it together. And I would be working out right now. So it's okay. My abs are getting some rest right now.
Okay. Well, hey, to be honest, if we weren't doing this, I probably would be running right now. So I think I'm saving both of us a workout today, which means what? That means we might have to work out extra tomorrow. So,
yes.
but that's tomorrow, so we'll deal with that then. Yeah. So, Ladonna, I wanna jump right into it. First of all, okay, let's go here. Do me a favor, introduce yourself to our audience, and tell us who you are and a little bit about what you do.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Ladonna Croffe, and I am a motivational speaker, also a life coach, Live Epic Coaching, is my business. I love people. I believe that every single person has greatness on the inside of them. And so it's my I feel like God put me on this planet to help other people realize just how amazing they are, how much potential they have, their identity as humans. I know it took me a long time to really understand my worth and my
Mhm.
value. And so now being on the other side, like having that understanding, I just want other people to know too of how great they are, that greatness is on the inside. Circumstances and conditions don't define us. Our past does not get to dictate our future. All of the things. So I'm just all
Mhm.
about empowering people. And I really love empowering young people, young adults. That's my lane. I've been in the higher ed space for about 20 years. And so I just really enjoy, again, just bringing empowerment, inspiration, however I can, with my words, with my life, with the way I treat people,
Yeah.
all of those things. Yeah, so happy to be here.
Yeah, good, 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 good. So I like one thing that you said, which
Just,
explains how we connected because you said something that I always say when I introduce myself a lot of times.
okay,
That is, I'm a person that loves people,
I do.
right? That is like my introduction. Like people are like, well, who are you? What do you do? And usually I go through a whole list of, well, I did this. But I always say, well, to put it all together, I'm just a person that loves people. That
Yeah,
that's
that's
it.
the right. That's like the core. That's my thing. It's like I love God, love people. That's
Yep.
my life's work. You know, if I can do that, oh well, I'm doing good.
Right, right, right.
Mm-hmm.
So we met. We are both members of the Next Level Speakers Academy,
Yes.
Chicago chapter. To be
Yes.
more more specific. Um, so I think that was our first time meeting each other. Part of
Yeah.
our
December.
last meeting, that December. Okay,
Yep. That was the first time. Yeah.
meeting each other in person.
Yep.
Um, and so that was a great experience. And then I started. Well, I had already started my online community, um,
Mm-hmm.
but I started this year. Started being more um, proactive about growing in it and really,
Mm-hmm.
getting into it. And you uh, joined the community, and we had a similar conversation like this because I do a meet the community interviews is what I like to call them. So
Right.
community members can get to know the other members,
Mm-hmm.
especially when you are a person that has something that of substance that I think will be
Yeah.
beneficial to the rest of the community. So I have those interviews to in order to introduce, everybody to the great people that we have a part of the community. And so you guys that are watching or listening, make sure you go to Facebook and look up the Deal Heal Fulfill community, right? Deal Heal Fulfill community private group on Facebook. We are there. Also, the link will definitely be in the description under the show. So whether you're listening or watching, on YouTube, you'll be able to just go to the description, and the link will be there for you to join our amazing uh, I would say platform, our amazing community that I started. That is not just all about me, and that's what I was just having a conversation with someone before we started recording, and they called, and I'm like, man, they said, I really appreciate you sharing my stuff in your community. And I said, it's not just my community. I never wanted to build a community that's just about me, but
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to build a real community where we're all pouring into each other and we're all adding to each other. So I'm like, so as long as you're admitting stuff that's of substance, that's going to help build us up, that's going to help us in some type of way, I'm like, I'm definitely, supporting. So that's the community that I wanted to
Mm-hmm.
build, a community that all of us are a part of. My face might be on the front, and I'm gonna make sure that I change that to make it more group. But at the time, I was like, I need a picture to put up, so I just put myself
Yep.
up.
Yep. It looks good.
But yeah, we just want to grow that and really build a community that's accessible to everybody and that everyone can learn from, but also contribute to. So that's the
Mm-hmm.
community that we're building. But that being said, I'm listening to what you were kind of going through your introduction of who you
Yeah.
are, and one of the things that you said was it took you a while to find your own worth right? And I always say that with all of us, there's a story before the story. Like, yeah, this is who you are now, but
Yeah.
there was a journey to get here. So tell us who was the younger version of Ladonna? Who was she, and how did she get to this point and turn into the version of you that's here now?
Yeah. Oh, I can take that in so many ways, but this, like for real, like that, it goes deep, right? Because we live a lot of life. Um,
Mhm.
and so I'll just say I grew up in church,
Mhm.
born and raised in
PK?
church. You know how they say it? I think we talked to wait, no, I'm not a PK. Is that what
Okay.
you're no, not a PK. But
Just
born and
under
raised,
them, right?
right?
Just right one step below.
One step below, because born and raised, I'm telling you, love church, love God, love Jesus with all my heart. I got saved when I was in third grade. Um, and I meant it. Like I meant every bit of it. Like
Mhm.
with my whole heart, I love Jesus as best as I could, right? Um, but what's other things in life were happening. I was sexually abused at a really young age. Um, and when you're 6, 7 years old, you don't know how to process that,
Mhm.
right? What I do know though, and my mom, she would testify about this at church when they used to have testimony service.
Mhm.
My mom would testify about a moment that I had forgotten about until she said it. But she would say, thank you, God, for my daughter. When she was 5 years old, she prayed this prayer. Please, dear Lord, help me to keep my dress down and my legs closed. Um,
Mhm.
and at face value, it sounds like, wow, that's a powerful prayer for a little girl to be praying. She's thinking about purity. No, like
Mhm.
I was in a house with people that were doing things to me that I didn't want them to.
Mhm.
They were doing things to me that just weren't right. And I was asked, I believe that was a plea for help, like, God, help me, you
Right.
know?
Yeah.
Um, and what happened is that I didn't see like an immediate help because I was still being messed with and messed over,
Mhm.
for quite a while. And I think when that happened, what ended up happening was that it put this like idea, it planted a seed within me that I wasn't good enough for God to rescue me. You know, I wasn't good enough. There was something about me that wasn't quite right, that even after I prayed that prayer, I was still being messed over. And so if I take it all the way back, it starts there, right, where that seed was
Yeah.
planted, right? Because I was taught, God loves you. You pray, He answers your prayer. Um, but He didn't answer it immediately, and He didn't answer it in the way that I thought. And when you're a kid, you don't understand how to logically process through all of those things. So
Mhm.
there was that. And then it was growing up, without a relationship with my father. I'm glad you have the Girl Dad podcast. I now have a relationship with my dad, and it's beautiful. But I didn't have that as a little girl growing up. So there was that part of it, right? And then as I get older, again, I grew up in church. I love God. I started singing. I started leading um, worship. I was teaching Sunday school. I was doing all of the things in church. But there was still this little girl who had been sexually abused and that didn't get the rescuing that she thought,
Mhm.
in the way that she thought she should have. And so I didn't necessarily deal with that. I actually stuffed it in. I didn't tell anybody about it. I was 19 before I even talked about abuse. Um, so I'm dealing with this like internally, but I'm still in church and I love God with as best I can. And as I get older, um, these feelings start coming up that I don't like. I don't like the sadness because it's deep, the feeling of rejection and abandonment. And to make a long story short, I eventually discovered that food is a great way to sedate yourself. Food is a great way to keep your feelings and your emotions stuffed down. And I was already partially detached because when I was being sexually abused, like my response was, let me just sort of shut my emotions off and kind of detach because that was my defense mechanism.
Mhm.
And then I piled food on top of that, so I started this whole like journey of using food, and I didn't know it then, but I was using food as a drug. And it started like really in my late teens. And then when I got into my 20s, it got even crazier, and food became this crutch. And at some point, I don't know when it happened, Ernest, but at some point, I crossed that line. of being able to eat in moderation. I don't know how it happened, but it happened where all of a sudden I found myself um, eating uncontrollably. I found myself not being able to say no to food. I found myself eating food that was really for a family of 4 to 6 people. I could easily eat that in one meal. And so life just got really, really messy. I didn't like myself very much. I didn't love myself very much. And I thought that in order for other people to like me, I had to be exactly who they wanted me to be. I had to be
Mhm.
perfect, you know? Um, and so I lived this life where I was just, if you thought I was one way, that's exactly how I'm going to be. If you think I'm the good Christian girl, I'm going to be the good Christian girl. I remember one time, and this is sad to say, but this went all the way into like my 20s, into my 30s. I was just a person who felt like in order to be loved and accepted, I had to be perfect and I had to be exactly who you wanted me to be because you might not give me what I need, which is love.
Mhm.
I might not be able to get that from you if I'm not exactly who you want me to be. And so, and it spilled over into everything in my life. I remember when I was living in Texas, I lived in Texas for about 13 years and was working at this job. And I mentioned one time that I didn't really like coffee, that I wasn't really a coffee drinker. And then the people that I said it to, they were like, okay, LaDonna's not a coffee drinker. And it's so simple, such a simple thing. But for me, I felt like um, any other time I was around those people, even if I just wanted to taste coffee for a little bit, I felt like I couldn't do it because I already said I'm not a coffee drinker. And
Mhm.
so that became a thing that I felt like I had to do because now these people think that I don't like coffee. Now maybe I want to try it, but I can't now because they think I'm not a coffee drinker. It's so like it was even like little crazy things like that. In the office, I used to sing, hum a lot. And like my supervisor, she was like, "Oh, you're our songbird." And so now all of a sudden, I felt like I got to make sure I'm singing in the office. If I'm walking down the hall, make sure I'm humming a tune. So it was like my whole life was about what can I do to make sure that I am being what somebody else expects me to be, you know?
Mhm.
And that's actually a very exhausting way to live.
Yeah.
It's like so exhausting. And so having all of that, like those unresolved, like childhood, like issues and the traumas, the abandonment feeling and rejection of not knowing my dad, and then the eating thing, and then the whole other part of I'm a Christian and I love God, but my life in a lot of ways doesn't reflect that, right? I can't control what I put in my mouth. um, and so there was a part of me too that just felt like I just was a hypocrite. I wasn't genuine. And so I didn't know who LaDonna was. I didn't know I didn't know LaDonna until maybe
Mhm.
like 15 years ago. I feel like I was introduced to LaDonna. And I got there because I recognized, first of all, that I really had an addiction. And again, I can't even tell you when I crossed that line, but it happened. And I go to a meeting 3 days a week and I stand up and I say, my name is LaDonna and I'm a food addict. I never thought in a million years that I would ever be saying that, but I do. I say it 3 times a week. Um, and recognizing that and recognizing my powerlessness over my ability to eat certain things and to gain control, for me, um, walking through that journey, because it's a surrender. So now I don't eat flour and sugar. And that's a huge surrender. So walking through that
Mhm.
type of surrender, it helped me to understand God way more than I did when I growing up in church. I have a different understanding of who he is as my father. I have a different understanding of who he is as the person who created me and my worth and value because of him. And so it's crazy to say it, but my food addiction, it really helped me in my
Mhm.
relationship and in my identity because I have a greater understanding of who I am because I really had to go to God for help. And he and in that process of surrendering to him and going to him for help, that's where I started to discover like who LaDonna is, her worth and her value. It's not attached to what I look like. It's not attached to what I can do. It's not attached to me being perfect. I'm worthy, quite frankly,
Mhm.
because I exist.
Mhm.
That's it. I woke up this morning, so I
Right.
am worthy and I exist because God determined that it would be so. And I get that now. I don't have to do anything great and amazing. I wake up, I'm worthy, and I had to, and it took like a food addiction and then surrendering this
Right.
food addiction to God for me to really understand that.
Yeah.
Um,
And
yeah.
I want to touch on that, right? Because you mentioned definitely growing up in the church,
Yeah.
right? And so, and I talk about this all the time, and it is part of my testimony too,
Yeah.
is that growing up in the church, we learn different scriptures, and sometimes we quote them, just they're quotables. We can throw them out real quickly. And one of the scriptures is all things work for the good of those that love the Lord, right? So we love to throw that out, right? And so when I'm talking and I talk about that, I said we say all things, but we don't really mean all things. We really mean all good things,
Good
right?
thing.
So it's like all good things, whenever something good happens, oh, it's working out. You know what I mean? I'm
Hmm.
like, but if we're going to go by the scripture, by what it says all things work, right? And
Yeah.
so when you mentioned about the food addiction being a good thing, right? On this journey that I'm on now, it started a couple years ago, and it started with my divorce,
Hmm.
with me going through the divorce. And now I have to give this disclaimer: it has nothing to do with my ex-wife,
Yeah.
right? My ex-wife and I are very good friends. We've been friends longer than we were married, right? So we actually been knowing each other since kindergarten. So
Hmm.
we have a long history. So we're good. It had nothing to do with that. That just was the catalyst that turned things around for me, right? And so I ended up going through this divorce that I didn't even never knew that I didn't expect to go through, and found myself it just in a space where I'm a little bit older, you call it a midlife crisis if you want, you know what I'm saying? So I'm going through this midlife crisis. I'm getting divorced. Then COVID hit, right? And so at that time, I was the executive pastor at a church that I helped start,
Hmm.
and COVID shut our church down. My kids, all my kids are getting older, at that time. And so I'm in this transition point where it's like, okay, I don't have the church no more because the church is closed down. I don't have my marriage no more because we're getting divorced. I still have my kids, but they're not kids anymore. You
Hmm.
know what I mean? They're young adults now doing their own thing. So I'm a father, but I'm not, I'm in a different phase of fatherhood, And so all of these transitions at the same time. And I'm like, okay, who am I? You know, who am I now? Because now I'm definitely not who I was this time last year. I'm in a whole new space. And so I started this journey of personal development
Yeah.
and things of that nature, and started really finding out who I was. And in the midst of that, God gave me this quote, to even added to me looking for purpose in that same time frame too. And it was that it was pain births purpose,
Yeah.
purpose births progress, and progress is the evidence that God is at work,
Hmm.
right? And so he gave me that quote in the midst of me going through, my transition, and it has turned into this, 186 episodes. This is 186 episode.
Wow.
It's all that started from my divorce, right?
Yep.
Because one of the things that I realized, and also you mentioned about the Girl Dad Discussions podcast, all of that is connected. Because
Yep.
one of the things that I realized coming out of my divorce was that every woman I've ever talked to was a fatherless daughter. And
Mm.
so once I made that connection, and I'm not going to go through the whole thing all over again
Yeah.
because I know my listeners like, oh, we heard that before. But it was the start of everything that
Yeah.
I'm doing now,
Hmm.
But if I had never got divorced, if I hadn't been, going through that transition,
Yeah.
I would have never looked at those things, you know.
Exactly.
So now I can look at it and say all things work because now I'm 3 years in. I'm got two podcasts. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I wrote a couple
Totally.
ebooks. You know.
Yeah, I was telling my friend either yesterday or the day before, but we were talking about um that idea of all things, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I was saying to her, do you know, like, God doesn't have a plan B. He only has a plan A for our lives. He only has a plan A for my life. So it doesn't matter what I've encountered, doesn't matter the circumstances or the conditions, doesn't matter any of that. God isn't like, oh man, this that fell apart. Let me go to my second plan. Let me go to plan B. No, God only has plan A. So he makes everything work for plan A to be like, right, to come to pass. And I love what you talked about, because that's part of what I do, like with Live Epic coaching. With that framework, I talk about, okay, how do we take our life and our circumstances, and how do we actually live epic? How do we live empowered, right? How do we live with purpose? How do we live inspired? How do we live connected? And that empowered part, it's take responsibility for how we respond to the things that happen to us.
Yes.
That's what it's all about, right? Because bad is going to happen. Life is going to do what life is going to do. Circumstances are going to go up and down, left, right. We can't control most of that stuff that's happening. But the most important thing in all of it that we can control is how we respond.
Yeah.
And so that's why, we can take a food addiction. That's why we can look at a divorce. And that's why we can look at these things and say, okay, let me figure out what's good in this, right? What good can come of this? And so you got to take responsibility for how we respond, because that's the only thing that we can control. And a part of taking that responsibility, we have to be able to look for the good. We have to be able to find the good so that we can show up differently, right? So, because if we show up looking for the negative, if we show up focus on the negative, that's all we're going to find.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's exactly what you said, because that's one of the things that I teach all the time is like you can only control, and like my daughter's my daughter's going to be 22 so right. So
Mm-hmm.
we're having this conversation, you know, a lot more often than we used to, because now she's a young adult, so she's having these different, experiences,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm like, she come home, she was at working at a job that I didn't like. I didn't like it for her. The job itself, I don't care who works there. It's a great job for
Mm-hmm.
some people, but the environment at this particular job was not good for her. And didn't like her being there, but that was her job at the time. And she would come home every day with a story. Like, Dad, this what happened today, and this happened and this happened. And I'm like, talking to her about, her experiences. And she was talking about being hurt emotionally, and people not treating you a certain way, and how do you respond to that, and I'm like, you don't want to be the angry woman, you don't want to be the angry black woman, whatever. I'm like, does that make how they treated you right? No, but you can't control how someone
Nope.
treats you. You can't control what someone says to you. They're in control of that, but you can control how you respond. You know what I mean? Like that's the only part you can control. And so by the way that you respond, you can monitor or disrupt whatever that situation is by the way you respond. But also by the way you respond, you can make it worse or you can make it better. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. Yes. And sometimes it's tough though, right? Because you try to figure out, um, sometimes it's difficult to respond in a way that's productive, right? And so for me, I try to um, remind myself that I don't know the whole story. I don't know another person's entire story. I don't know why they said what they said. I don't know what hurt they're dealing with. I don't know what trauma they've been through. I don't know what happened at their home before they got to work. I don't know what happened in traffic on the way. I don't
Right.
know the whole story. And so, like, if I could just consistently remind myself, LaDonna, you don't know the whole story, it actually helps me to respond with a little bit more um, compassion, because I
Mhm.
don't know. Everybody has a story. Everybody has something, that they're dealing with, that they're struggling
Mhm.
with. Um, so a mentor of mine, she says this. She says, LaDonna, every single thing that anybody does in life, it's coming from two places. Either they're showing love or they're calling for love. Now,
Mhm.
as humans, we can be very unskillful in how we do it. But ultimately, when you really look at it, those are the two things that are happening. We're trying to express love, or we're asking for somebody to love us. And so these are things that I try to like keep in the back of my head, right? When I am navigating relationships with people, when I'm feel like maybe you shouldn't have done that, or maybe you shouldn't have said that. But let me remember, you're probably just asking for love. You're unskillful
Mhm.
in how you're doing it, but I get what you're doing. Like
Yeah,
it's having that lens. Just it kind of it helps you to show up differently.
yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
that's one of the things that I teach, and I was teaching this, sharing this with my daughter too, is
Mhm.
you're in charge of you because only you can control you.
Yep.
Right. And so even when you get in situations where someone says something or did something, they still don't control you. You still are in control of how you react and what you say. And I said there are certain things that you have to think about on how you want to live your life. Right. So when she would come home, she left that job, so I'm so glad she left it.
Mhm.
But when she would come home, when she would have these stories, and so I would ask her, number one, I would say, well, why are you still working there? You know, but then she would have conversations. Everybody got a cell phone, and so she would be having these conversations. And sometimes there's like almost arguments or whatever, or combative with whoever is on the other end. And so when she would get off the phone, and I'm like, well, who are you talking to? Like one of my friends or whatever. And I said, well, it seems like y'all argue a lot, right? And she's like, well, and I'm like, is that the kind of relationship that you want to have? Friend or no friend? Do you always want every time you talk to this person, even if this is your friend, y'all arguing all the time? That
Mhm.
don't seem like a good relationship to me. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? I'm like, so now, not that I have a problem with it, but let's just say now your peace is disturbed, and now you come home, and now you're telling me the story. Now my peace is disturbed. You know what I'm saying? And so how far is it going to go? I
Yeah.
said you have to learn to monitor what you allow in your space.
Mm-hmm.
And I think she's just at the age by her being as young as she is that they don't really know what peace is yet. You know what I mean? So they don't really recognize what it means to be peaceful and
Mhm.
have peace in your life because in their 20s, you know what I'm saying? You're looking to make you're looking for the noise. You know what
Yeah,
I'm saying?
yeah. That's so true. Yeah, but there's something. I think you're right, Ernest. I think that as we age, I know it's true for me that as I've aged, I've always appreciated like peace and calmness, but definitely as I age, I appreciate just even if everything around me can be chaotic, if within myself, if I can
Mhm.
find a sense of peace and comfort, I protect that. You know
Yeah.
how they say protect your peace at all costs. I do. Like I protect it because it's so special.
Mhm.
And it's really and it's a peace that comes from God, right? It's a peace that surpasses all of our understanding, where it doesn't matter what's happening, you still have this inner knowing that at the end of the day, I'm okay, life is gonna be
Mhm.
okay. And yeah, we get to a point where we really want to protect that. So we're careful about who we let in our space, and even like not even people, but also we're careful about what we watch, what we listen
Mhm.
to, right? The company that we're around, the type of environments that we're in, all of that stuff. We pay more attention to it because we
Yeah.
get, yeah, like how important it is just to protect that peace.
Yeah. I
Mhm.
had I had a friend of mine that was at my home for a while, right? They were visiting, so they were staying with me for a while, and they watched the what do they call it? The reality TV,
Oh,
right? They watched a reality TV show. So it's always like some kind of drama show, Housewives of this or whatever, and it's just always. And it just got to the point that I didn't like coming to my own home
mm,
because when I would walk in, like just come into my house, I would feel that weight of that dysfunction and all of that. With
yeah,
before that, you know what I'm saying? My house, I always say if it's one place that I'm gonna have peace, it's gonna be in my house. And
yeah,
so I've always had that. And so I'm like, man, I had to have a conversation. I'm like, even what you watching, I'm like, what are you watching? And they're like, I'm watching whatever. I'm like, I don't really watch that in my house. You know what I mean? Like, so, you know what I mean? I'm not telling you what to watch or whatever, but let's switch that up a little bit because now it's disturbing, you know what I'm saying, the
Yeah.
atmosphere in my home. You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
so, like you said, we got to be mindful of what we listen to. We have to be mindful of what we watch. We have to be mindful of the company that we keep and what they do. You know
Mhm.
what I'm saying? Because what they do affects us when they come into our, come into our space. And that was just one of those things that I was just like, man, when it got to the point that I didn't like coming to my own house, I'm like, okay, we gotta adjust some things now. You know
Mhm.
what I mean? Because do I want to be a blessing to you? Yes. Do I, want to support you? And while you're making this transition, of course, 100%. But at the same time, I can't allow you to disturb my peace because now that's gonna mess both of us up. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah. Guard your heart. What's that? There's that scripture in Proverbs, right? Guard your heart, for out of it flows the issues of life.
Mhm.
Yeah. So it's so crucial and important. Yeah, to protect that. Hmm.
Yep, yep, no problem, no problem. So we've been talking a while. I want to hit on one thing, which I
Okay.
think is a um kind of an underlining theme in the midst of this conversation, sort of, and it's about identity. And we've talked about it. You talked about in your earlier stages, and then having to find your identity. I talked about, always been a person who was very self-confident and know who I was, but then just found myself in this space where everything was changing. I'm like, okay, I know who I was, but who am I now? And so even with this thing of identity, when we talking to young people, especially who are just on that journey, just beginning that journey of trying to figure out who they are and who they are in the world, especially as young adults, because now you have this new freedom that you didn't have and new choices that you get to make on your own. And all of those, even your choices, comes from you. But if you don't know who you are, then you may be making choices that benefits other people or making choices that just following the plan of someone else. So when you're talking to the young people that you're talk to, you know uh, on your daily basis around the sense